A soldier spends years learning to shut things out, but a man who has lost too much learns to listen, especially to his dog. Ethan Cole had spent most of his adult life walking into places sane people ran away from. Afghanistan, Syria, little dots on the map that never made the news but still bled red into his memory, Green Beret, multiple tours, too many funerals. Now, officially, he was retired. Unofficially, he was just unfinished. He had come to the mountains of southwestern Colorado because no one cared who you used to be up here. The San Juan Range was an endless wall of jagged white teeth, trapping snow and silence. The nearest town, Silver Ridge, was a scatter of weather-beaten buildings, a diner that closed at 7 p.m., and a gas station where the pump sometimes worked if you kicked it. It suited him. His cabin had once been a Forest Service outpost, long before the budget cuts. It sat on the shoulder of the mountain like a stubborn scar, dark logs half buried in snowdrifts. A wood stovepipe coughing thin smoke into the freezing air. From his front porch, he could see a frozen river snaking through the valley and, on clear days, the dead skeleton of an abandoned ski resort clinging to the opposite ridge. He lived alone, except for Rex. Rex was the only thing in Ethan's life that felt simple. A powerful German shepherd with a broad chest, thick winter coat, and eyes the color of old amber whiskey. Rex carried himself like he knew exactly where he belonged in the world. His ears were always working, swiveling at sounds Ethan's human senses missed. His nose read the wind like a book. His loyalty was quiet and absolute. They'd met in a rehab kennel outside Fort Bragg, one washed-up soldier and one unfit for service explosive detection dog with a scar along his flank and a note on his chart about overprotective aggression. Ethan had taken one look at him and signed the adoption papers without reading the rest. Rex had slept at his bedside through every nightmare since. Their days in the mountains had settled into a ritual. Up at 0500. Coffee, black and punishing. A brutal workout in the snow that left Ethan's lungs burning and his muscles begging for mercy. Chopping wood until his thoughts quieted. Patrols, he still called them that. Even if it was just him and Rex crossing frozen creeks and tree lines instead of foreign borders. He told himself he walked so far each day to keep his head clear, to make sure no mountain lions stalked too close, to check for fresh avalanche slides. The truth was simpler. He didn't know how not to be on patrol. On the January afternoon, everything changed. The sky was the color of old gunmetal. Clouds sagged low, promising more snow. The wind pushed fine ice crystals across the crusted drifts, making them dance like ghost fire. Ethan trudged along an old logging road, his breath fogging in front of him, his rifle slung more from habit than need. Rex trotted ahead, leaving neat, perfect paw prints on the hardpack. Ethan's mind had slipped into that dull, suspended state he almost trusted. Not relaxed, never relaxed, but quiet. The mountains hummed around him. The soft creak of snow-laden pines, the distant crack of ice shifting on the frozen river far below. Then Rex stopped. There was no drama in it, no sudden bark. One moment he was moving, the next he was carved out of stone, head lifted, nostrils flaring. The thick fur along his spine stood up in a dark ridge. A low sound rumbled in his chest, too low to be a growl, more like a warning the earth itself was giving. Ethan's pulse jumped instantly, the way it had 1,000 times when a convoy stalled or a comm line went dead. He scanned the trees, every sense yanked into sharp focus. "Talk to me, buddy," he murmured. Rex took one step off the road, then another. His body language was wrong. Ethan had seen him stiffen at the scent of a bear, go wired tight when he caught old wolf sign. This wasn't that. This was uncertain, uneasy. He glanced back once at Ethan, eyes bright and urgent, then moved deliberately toward the tree line. Ethan didn't argue with him. He simply adjusted the strap on his pack and followed. They left the old road and cut through lodgepole pines weighed down with snow. The crunch of Ethan's boots was unnaturally loud in the hush. The wind died as they dipped into a shallow ravine, the world shrinking to trunks, branches, and the faint white breath from Rex's mouth. The dog moved without hesitation, weaving between boulders and deadfall, occasionally pausing to taste the air before adjusting his course. Up ahead, the slope steepened. Ethan swore under his breath when they hit a patch of old avalanche debris, splintered trees, icy mounds, the mountain's memory of a bad day. He climbed anyway, lungs burning, trusting Rex's nose. After 20 hard minutes, they crested a narrow rise, and Ethan saw it. At first, he thought the mountain had simply cracked open, a jagged line in the snow, darker than it should have been. Then he saw the outlines, torn boards, twisted metal, shards of glass half buried. An old structure had once clung to this rock, maybe a ski patrol shack from the resort's glory days, before an avalanche or time had ripped it apart. Now, it was a ruin. Broken timbers jutted out like ribs. One wall leaned precariously against a boulder. The roof was gone. Snow filled most of the interior. Rex didn't stop at the edge. He threaded through the wreckage, moving slow, controlled. He sniffed along a collapsed corner, then suddenly dropped his head to the snow and began to dig furiously. Ethan's heartbeat hammered harder. There was nothing human out here. No one came this deep into the backcountry in winter without leaving tracks, and he hadn't seen any. "Rex," he said quietly, crouching, "what have you got?" Rex ignored him, thick paws flinging snow aside in frantic bursts. 10 seconds later, his claws scraped wood, a muffled hollow sound. Ethan leaned in. Under the drift, half hidden by fallen beams, was a hatch. Rusted steel, heavy. Not ski patrol standard. It had no business in an old shack halfway up a mountain. The hairs on the back of Ethan's neck rose. Someone had built a secret under this ruin. Rex whined, pawing at the edges, nails clicking on metal. There was a faint smell leaking from the seams, something Ethan couldn't place. Sweat, maybe. Fear. Stale air. "Easy," Ethan said, though it was himself he was talking to now. He cleared the snow with his gloved hands, fingers numb. A recessed handle appeared, almost invisible under rime. He wrapped his hand around it and pulled. For a second, it didn't budge. Then, with a groan of protesting hinges, the hatch lifted a few inches, exhaling a breath of warm, stale air into the freezing afternoon. Rex recoiled, then shoved his nose toward the opening, whining, nails scrabbling on the rim. From below came a sound so faint it could have been his imagination. A cough, then a voice. Rough, cracked, female. "Help, please," Ethan's training said. Unknown structure, unknown threat, no support, no comms. Back out, mark location, reassess. His instinct, the part that had once leapt toward gunfire because someone was screaming, said the opposite. Rex made the choice for him. The dog shoved his head under the hatch, wedging his shoulders, muscling it upward with a grunt until it swung open enough for Ethan to grab and heave it back fully. Warm darkness yawned below. The faint glow of a battery lantern flickered off concrete walls. The air smelled like sickness, fear, and something chemical. "Hello?" Ethan called down, voice firm but controlled. "My name's Ethan Cole. I'm coming in." "Don't," the voice croaked, then broke into a coughing fit. "Please, just hurry." There was a second sound, softer. The hitching, barely contained breath of a child. Ethan's jaw tightened. He clicked on his small tactical flashlight and swung his legs onto the metal rungs of the ladder, bolted into the shaft. Rex pressed against him, whining, but stayed topside until Ethan snapped a finger downward. "Down," he ordered quietly. Rex climbed down after him, clumsy but determined, nails scraping on the rungs. The bunker wasn't large, maybe 20 feet long, 10 wide. Concrete walls, low ceiling, no windows. It was just high enough for Ethan to stand without hunching. The air was too warm, heavy with the sharp tang of bleach burned into old stains and something metallic he didn't want to identify. On a narrow cot at the far end lay a woman. She was in her early 30s maybe, though the pain lines on her face made her look older. Her dark hair was tangled on a sweat-slick pillow. A makeshift bandage wrapped around her left side, dark with old blood. Her skin had that waxy, too bright look Ethan recognized from 100 medevacs. Beside the cot, half hidden by the shadow of a shelf loaded with canned food, stood a boy. 8, maybe 9, too thin for winter, wearing an oversized hoodie and jeans tucked into worn-out boots. His eyes were the worst part, huge, hazel, and far too old for his face. He didn't flinch at Ethan. He did stare at Rex. The dog hopped off the last rung with a thud, shook once, and then froze. Head tilted, ears forward but body low. The boy took a breath that sounded almost like a sob of relief. "He found us," the boy said softly. "You came because of him." It wasn't a question. Ethan's eyes took in everything. The empty water jugs in the corner, the portable heater guttering on low, the locked metal door at the other end of the room with heavy bolts on the inside. Someone had wanted to keep whatever was in this bunker hidden. Someone had wanted whoever was in here to stay. Ethan moved to the woman's side, his motions controlled, efficient. He set down his pack, checked her pulse with practiced fingers. Fast, thready, fever-hot skin. The bandage was soaked through, too old, too tight. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. She blinked up at him, fighting through the haze. "Lena," she whispered. "Lena Harper." The boy took a half-step forward. "Noah," he said, voice shaking but trying to be steady. "I'm Noah. She's my mom." The lie was so bare Ethan almost winced. The bone structure wasn't there, the coloring wrong, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the way the boy put himself between Lena and this stranger with a dog and a gun. Tiny shoulders squared, jaw clenched. "Okay, Noah," Ethan said. "Your mom's hurt bad. She needs antibiotics and fluids. You've got maybe a day before things get worse. There's not enough water down here. She'll crash." Lena coughed, eyes fluttering. "We can't leave," she rasped. "He'll find us if we leave." "Who?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the shape of the answer. The monster. There was always a monster. Noah's eyes flicked toward the hatch above, like he could see through concrete and snow. "Him," the boy whispered. "The sheriff." The word fell like a rock in the small room. Sheriff. In a county this remote, that title meant more than a badge. It meant control over dispatch, over who got stopped on back roads, over what reports disappeared in a drawer. Ethan's spine went cold. In the town store, he'd seen the man's face once on a faded re-election poster. Sheriff Dane Mercer. Square jaw, polished smile. A veteran too, by the way. The other old-timers spoke about his service. Ethan had shaken his hand at the gas station on his first week in town. He remembered the grip, firm, too practiced. The eyes, friendly on the surface, flat underneath. He'd clocked him as the kind of man who knew exactly how much power he held and enjoyed every ounce of it. "What happened?" Ethan asked, forcing his voice to stay calm, clinical. His hands were already working, tearing open his med kit, scanning the bandage for signs of infection. Lena grabbed his wrist weakly. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so drained. "If you help us," she rasped, eyes burning into his, "he will come for you too. He never... Let's go." Ethan stared back, some old, half-dead part of him stirring. The part that had stepped into ambushes so his team could live. The part that had crawled through dust and blood to drag his wounded captain out of a kill zone. "I'm not much of a runner," he said quietly. "Tell me what I've walked into." The story came in fits and starts, broken by coughing and clenched jaws. Lena Harper hadn't always been a ghost in a bunker. She'd been a dispatcher at the Silver Ridge Sheriff's Office for 6 years. Knew the radios, the codes, the regulars. Knew how often tourists got lost and how many drunk drivers the deputies pulled off the highway on weekends. And she'd known Dane Mercer before he was sheriff, back when he wore a uniform with a different flag patch and called himself a hero. "He came back from Afghanistan with medals. And something else," she whispered. "He liked being in charge, liked knowing where every unit was, what every call was, liked deciding what got written down. It started small, a complaint that never made it into the log, a domestic call resolved without paperwork, then bigger things, trucks that got waved through traffic stops without plates, night patrols that veered off the highway and onto old logging roads for surveillance. Lena had ignored the prickle in her gut as long as she could. Single mom, good salary, health insurance. Then one night, she'd stayed late to reconcile dispatch tapes after a storm outage. She'd heard a recording that should not have existed, on a channel she should not have access to. Mercer's voice, cold and efficient, giving orders in the woods. A man crying in the background, the clink of chains. "Move him to the old mine," he'd said calmly. "The truck from Farmington will pick him up at 3. Make sure he's quiet by then. We don't need another screamer like last time." The tape should have overwritten itself. For some reason, it hadn't. Lena had made a copy, on impulse, on fear, on something. Then she'd started digging. quietly, carefully. She'd cross-checked missing persons reports with nights certain deputies were off-grid. She'd traced burner phones that bounced off towers near the abandoned resort. She'd found a pattern. People who argued with him disappeared, she whispered. Immigrant workers, drifters, a woman who tried to report him for... Her gaze flicked to Noah, and she didn't finish the sentence. He ran a pipeline, bodies for the cartel, favors for politicians, and everybody looked the other way because he kept the town safe. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't just corruption. It was a quiet, methodical, profitable cruelty. The kind of thing that thrived in forgotten corners of the country where nobody wanted to look too hard. "What about you?" he asked. "How did you end up here?" "I confronted him," she said simply, with a flicker of bitter humor. "Stupid, right? I thought if he knew I had proof I could force him to stop, or at least bargain. Tell him I'd go to the state investigators if he didn't resign." She paused, swallowing against the memory. "He smiled," she said softly. "Told me he appreciated my concern, that he'd take it under advisement. He walked me to my car, opened the door like a gentleman. I thought maybe I'd misjudged." Her hand trembled on the blanket. "The next night, my apartment burned," she whispered. "They said it was faulty wiring. Noah and I weren't home because I got a tip to leave." Her eyes glistened. "The tip was from a deputy with a conscience. He's gone now. Transfer. No forwarding address." Mercer couldn't afford Lena and Noah disappearing into a city with the evidence she held. So he'd done something smarter. He'd rescued them. He'd brought them up to the mountains for their safety, to a secure location while the arson was investigated, told Lena she was under his protection, that the cartel might want what she knew. "He locked us in here," Noah whispered, voice tight, arms wrapped around himself. "He said bad men would come if we left. He'd bring food and water and smile. Like we were pets." Lena had played along, for weeks, taking the supplies, pretending to be grateful, counting the steps in his routines. She'd hidden the thumb drive with the recordings and Noah's stuffed bear when Mercer searched her things. Then, 3 days ago, when Mercer brought rations down, he'd made a mistake. He'd left the bunker door propped open while he answered a call on his radio. Lena had slipped. A rusted piece of shelving had sliced deep into her side. Blood on concrete. Mercer's eyes changing. He'd pressed his hand to the wound, not in concern but calculation. "He said it was unfortunate," Lena whispered. "That infection risk was high down here, that he'd pray for us. Then he left. He bolted the door from the outside. And he hadn't come back." Ethan listened, jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. His hands worked on autopilot, cutting away the filthy bandage, flushing the wound with sterile saline, checking for signs of spreading infection. It was bad, but not hopeless. Not yet. "What about communication?" he asked. "Radio, phone?" Lena laughed once, a dry, painful sound. "No cell service. Radio's on a frequency he controls. The only thing he forgot was that I know how his system works." She jerked her chin at a battered handheld on the shelf. "I reprogrammed it. I can listen, not talk. He doesn't know that." Ethan glanced at the radio. County band, scratched, well used. "A weapon of a different kind. I can stabilize you," he said finally. "But not down here. You need clean water, heat that doesn't choke you, and more than the first aid kit you've got. My cabin's 3 miles downslope. We move now, we can make it before dark." Lena shook her head weakly. "He'll see us," she murmured. "He's got eyes everywhere. Snowmobiles, drones." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But right now, he doesn't know I exist. And your biggest problem isn't him. It's that fever." Noah looked between them, small face tight with terror. "If he finds us at your place, he'll kill you," he blurted. He said people who help us don't last long." Ethan thought of the quiet life he'd carved out, the way the townsfolk had learned not to ask about his past, the blessed anonymity, the empty chair at his table, the flag in the footlocker he never opened. He also thought of Noah's 2 old eyes and the way Lena had used the last of her strength not to beg for help, but to warn him off. "I've had worse odds," he said softly. "Rex and I aren't easy to kill." Rex huffed once, as if in agreement, and leaned his warm body against Noah's leg. The boy's hand slipped into the thick fur like it had always belonged there. The decision solidified in Ethan's chest like setting concrete. "We're going," he said. "Pack only what you can carry in under 10 seconds. The rest is dead weight." He started moving before they could argue. He rigged a fresh bandage, injected a broad-spectrum antibiotic from his kit into Lena's arm, and helped her sit up, gritting his teeth at her hiss of pain. He shrugged his pack onto his shoulders, redistributed weight so her arm could loop over him, light but brittle as dry twigs. By the time they reached the hatch, the sky had darkened, the first fat flakes beginning to fall. Ethan scanned the tree line. Nothing. No engine sounds, no drone whine. "Stay behind me," he told Noah. "Hands on Rex's harness. Don't let go. If I say down, you hit the snow and don't move until I tell you. Understood?" Noah's throat bobbed, but he nodded. Rex pressed close to his side like a living shield. They climbed out of the bunker and into the cold. The mountain accepted their intrusion with the same indifference it gave everything. Wind bit at their faces. Snow stung exposed skin. The path back was harder, with Lena's weight dragging at him and Noah stumbling, but Ethan's body slipped into the old cadence. Pace, breathe, scan. Every tree became potential cover. Every dip in the land, an escape route filed away in his mind. Halfway back, as they crossed a narrow saddle, the handheld radio on Lena's belt crackled. "Eat that again, Dane?" a male voice said, warped with static. "Thought you already cleaned up your loose ends up top." Mercer's voice came next, calm and smooth as, oiled steel. "She's taken care of," he said. "If she's not dead already, she will be by tonight. Infection's a better alibi than bullets. No body, no questions. The kid will be easy to reassign." Noah flinched like he'd been slapped. Ethan's hand tightened on Lena's waist. Another man laughed, the sound ugly. "You're a cold one, Sheriff." "Cold keeps you alive," Mercer replied. "Speaking of, 2 out-of-state trucks coming through the pass tonight. I want eyes on that Cole guy up on the ridge, just in case he starts poking around the wrong places. Ex-military like that, they get bored. Bored men snoop." Ethan felt Lena's muscles twitch under his arm. She looked at him, eyes wide. He forced his face blank even as his heart hammered. Mercer already had him in mind. They moved faster. By the time Ethan's cabin came into view, a dark shape through the thickening curtain of snow, Lena's legs were shaking uncontrollably. Noah's cheeks were raw with windburn. Rex's breath came in short puffs, but he never drifted more than a step from the boy. Inside, the warmth hit them like a physical wave. The cabin was Spartan: single bed, wood stove, battered table, 2 chairs, gear stacked in neat, disciplined piles. No photographs, no clutter. The skeleton of a life reduced to essentials. Ethan got Lena into the bed, layering blankets over her until her shivering eased. He set up an IV line with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done it in worse places. Saline dripped steadily into her arm. The color slowly began to return to her lips. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor beside Rex, fingers buried in the dog's fur, staring at the stove like he was afraid if he blinked, the fire would vanish. It should have felt like a temporary arrangement, a stopgap. It didn't. It felt like a line in the snow that couldn't be crossed back over. Night fell early and thick. The wind howled around the cabin, rattling the shutters. Ethan checked and rechecked the perimeter. Trip lines strung between trees. A motion sensor pointed down the approach path. A flare rigged to the old fence post. Old habits, sharpened by new stakes. At 300, Rex lifted his head from the hearth and stared at the door. A second later, Ethan heard it, the faint, distant whine of engines fighting the slope. Not one, several, crawling up the mountain like a slow infection. He killed the lantern with a quick twist. The cabin sank into orange-black shadow, lit only by the stove's coals. Noah sat up, eyes huge. Lena pushed herself up on one elbow, breath catching. "How many?" she whispered. Ethan moved to the narrow slit between shuttered window planks and peered out. Snow-reflected headlights in diffuse halos. He counted 3 sets, big vehicles, trucks or SUVs. Headlights killed as they neared the tree line. 3, he murmured, coming in from the north trail. Smart. Less chance of sliding off the main road. Rex's low growl. vibrated against Noah's leg like a warning drum. Lena's hand tightened on the blanket. "He won't knock," she whispered. "He'll surround the place, cut off exits. Then he'll walk up to your front door and pretend this is a conversation." "Good," Ethan said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "Conversations I can work with." He moved quickly, mind already mapping options. Fight here and now? The cabin was tiny, one door, two small windows, zero real cover inside. A trap for either side, escape into the storm. With Lena still weak and Noah exhausted, they wouldn't get far. Mercer had snowmobiles, thermal scopes. He needed something else. His gaze fell on the old CB radio rig on the shelf. It was a relic he'd installed more out of nostalgia than necessity, wired to an antenna pole on the roof. It could hit local truckers, search and rescue, and, if he bounced the signal right, the state patrol relay 30 miles away. Lena had Mercer's channel. Ethan had his own. He pulled the handheld radio off her belt, flipped it on. Static hissed, then broke. "Ridge," a deputy's voice was saying. "Cabin lights just went out. Looks like he knows we're here." Mercer's voice followed, closer now. "Of course he does, Jake. He's not stupid. Hold positions. I'll knock on the door like a good neighbor." Ethan walked to the table, his movements deliberate. He set the handheld down, flipped on the CB, and tuned it to the frequency he knew the State Highway Patrol used for weather advisories. Old habit. He always listened during storms. He pressed the transmit button, then taped it down with a strip of duct tape, leaving the mic open by the handheld radio. Lena's eyes widened. "You're going to—" "Let them hear him," Ethan said quietly. In his own words. He crossed to the door. "Stay behind the stove," he told Lena and Noah. "If anything happens, there's a crawl space under the back storage. Hatches under the throw rug. Rex will show you." Rex whined in protest, but Ethan met his eyes. "Guard," he said softly. "Them." Rex's ears flicked back once, then forward, as if in reluctant acceptance. He pressed closer to Noah. The knock when it came was polite. 3 firm raps. The kind a man used when he believed he owned whatever was on the other side. "Mr. Cole?" Mercer's voice called, muffled by wood and wind. "Dane Mercer, Sheriff. We've got some concerns about some tracks up this way. Mind if we talk?" Ethan could see his silhouette through the slit. A bulky parka, hat, the outline of a rifle slung but ready. Other shadows hovered between trees, patient and still. He opened the door just enough to stand in it, one hand on the frame, the other casually at his side. His pistol was holstered, but not far. "Bit late for a social call," Ethan said, voice flat. Mercer smiled, that same practiced politician's smile. "Storm's coming in," he said. "Just doing my duty, checking on our residents. Make sure no one's hosting trouble." His gaze flicked over Ethan's shoulder, taking in as much of the room as he could without stepping inside. His nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. "You've got company," he said lightly. "Thought you were the solitary type." Ethan didn't answer that. "You're a long way up a bad road for a welfare check, Sheriff." Mercer's smile thinned. "We tracked fresh prints," he said. 4 sets, yours, a big dog's, a woman's, a child's, coming down from a restricted area." He tilted his head. "You find something up there, Ethan?" Behind Ethan, the CB crackled softly, carrying Mercer's voice out into the storm and down the mountainside, a thread of sound weaving into state patrol headsets and trucker cabs. "Just snow and ghosts," Ethan said. Another flash behind Mercer's eyes. Annoyance now. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "in a place like this, we depend on each other to keep things quiet. People interfere in business they don't understand. Folks get hurt. Town suffers. Outsiders disappear, and no one asks where they went." The threat was gentle, almost fatherly. Ethan stepped out onto the small porch, closing the door halfway behind him, letting the cold slam into his unprotected arms. "You talking about Lena Harper?" he asked bluntly. Mercer's eyes hardened in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Now, that's an interesting name to bring up," he said softly. "Lady vanished a while back. Tragic. Apartment fire. Ashes. Poor boy of hers, too. I think about them sometimes." Ethan took another step forward, forcing Mercer to either back up or brush against him. The sheriff stayed put, too proud. "She's not your problem anymore," Ethan said. "She's mine." For a heartbeat, the storm hushed, like the whole mountain inhaled. Mercer's lips barely moved. "You have no idea what kind of fire you're standing in, son. Try me." On the CB, a distant voice cut in, faint but clear. "Copy that, Unit 12. Picking up unauthorized transmission from County Sheriff Freck. Patching to recorder. Stand by." Mercer frowned, glancing at the handheld clipped to his vest. Static crawled over the channel. "Jake," he said into it. "You copy? Getting interference?" "Loud and clear, Sheriff," the deputy's voice came back. "But, I'm pretty sure the whole damn mountain just heard you threaten an outsider and admit Mrs. Harper's vanishing was tragic. You want to maybe switch channels if you're gonna—" The deputy cut himself off abruptly, realizing too late what he'd just said on an open mic. Mercer's face went blank, blood draining out until it was a hard, pale mask. His eyes snapped to Ethan's cabin window, to the faint glow behind the shutters, to the CB antenna outside, then to Ethan himself. "Clever," they said. "Dead man," they added. He moved fast, hand dropping to his rifle. Ethan was faster. He slammed the door inward, using it as a shield as Mercer fired. The shot punched through wood, showering splinters. Noah cried out. Rex barked, a deep, explosive sound. "Down!" Ethan roared, diving behind the thick log wall as glass shattered in the side window. Bullets chewed up the table. The CB sparked and died. The quiet mountain became a battlefield in an instant. Rex bolted toward the back of the cabin, herding Lena and Noah toward the rug. Ethan caught a glimpse of Noah yanking it aside, eyes wide, hands shaking. The boy had listened. The hatch underneath gaped dark and narrow. "In!" Ethan shouted. "Go!" He fired 2 controlled shots through the front wall where Mercer's silhouette had been, not to kill, but to make him flinch back. He heard a curse, the crunch of boots as the sheriff dove for cover. Outside, deputies opened up with panicked bursts, bullets cracking into logs, throwing sparks off the stovepipe. The cabin groaned under the assault, old wood protesting. Ethan grabbed his go bag with his free hand and yanked open the crawlspace hatch. Lena half fell in, dragging Noah with her. Rex followed, tail vanishing into darkness. Ethan dropped a flare down after them, a weak orange glow in the cramped tunnel beyond. "Follow the pipe," he gasped. "It leads to the old root cellar 50 yards downslope. Stay low. Stay quiet." "What about you?" Noah's voice squeaked up, raw with fear. Ethan smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "I'll be right behind you." He slammed the hatch closed before Noah could argue and kicked the rug back into place. A bullet slammed into the doorframe where his head had been a heartbeat before. He was alone now, just the way he'd spent the last year telling himself he wanted to be. He took a breath that tasted like gunpowder and smoke and old memories. Then he got to work. He didn't try to hold the cabin. That would be suicide. Instead, he used it like bait. He lobbed a smoke grenade, one of the old ones he should have turned in years ago, out the back window, then slipped out after it into the swirling gray. Gunfire tracked his last position inside, chewing the empty doorway to splinters. He moved low, fast, circling the cabin in the blizzard-obscured dark. Shapes emerged and vanished, a deputy reloading behind a stump, another crouched behind a truck's open door. Ethan ghosted past, using the smoke and snow as cover, dropping one with a blow to the temple, disarming another so fast the man didn't realize his rifle was gone until he was face down in the drift. He didn't kill them if he didn't have to. Broken arms and concussions told less convincing stories than bodies. Mercer was different. The sheriff moved with the controlled aggression of someone who'd seen real fights. He fired in short, measured bursts, advancing between trees, eyes scanning for flanking, maneuvers. More than once, Ethan felt the man's gaze graze his hiding place like a searchlight. This wasn't some small-town bully with a badge. This was a predator with legal authority. A flash of movement to Ethan's right, a deputy aiming through the smoke, rifle tracking toward the back wall of the cabin where the crawlspace hatch lay hidden. Ethan didn't think. He stepped out, squeezed off 3 rounds, 1 into the deputy's shoulder, spinning him away from the cabin, 2 into the snow near Mercer's boots, forcing the sheriff to dive behind his truck. "Cole, Mercer shouted over the storm and gunfire. "You're throwing your life away over a woman who doesn't even belong here and a kid that isn't yours. You really want to die on this hill?" "Better than living on your leash," Ethan yelled back. The answer wasn't cool or strategic. It was raw, from the same place that had dragged Lena and Noah up the mountain. For a moment, there was only the howl of wind and the crackle of burning wood as a stray flare set the cabin's front wall alight. The blaze licked up hungrily, painting the snow in shades of orange and black. Then, a new sound cut through the chaos. A distant chop, 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 faint but growing. Helicopter. Ethan grinned grimly. The State Patrol had heard enough before the CB died. Mercer heard it too. His curses were lost in the storm, but Ethan could imagine them, short and vicious. The sheriff fired again, more wildly now, his careful control slipping. "Jake," he barked into his radio. "Get the trucks down the slope. Now, we're done here. This never happened, you hear me? Anyone asks, it was a training exercise. Shots fired by accident. Cole went crazy and—" A voice crackled over his radio that Ethan knew Mercer had not expected. "This is Trooper Ramirez, Colorado State Patrol Air 1, the woman said crisply. "We've been monitoring your channel, Sheriff Mercer. We have recordings of you discussing false reports, missing residents, and a Ms. Lena Harper, whose death you appear to have stage managed. You are ordered to stand down, disarm your personnel, and prepare to be detained for questioning." The blades were louder now, blowing snow off treetops in stinging gusts. For the first time, Mercer sounded genuinely afraid. "You don't know what you're stepping into, Ramirez," he snapped. "You turn that bird around, we can forget this little misunderstanding." "Negative, Sheriff," Ramirez replied. "We've also got a concerned citizen in our dispatch channel who sent over some very interesting audio files a few minutes ago. Recognize your own voice?" Ethan's chest tightened. "Lena!" Even crawling through the tunnel, bleeding and dizzy, she'd found the strength to dig that thumb drive out of Noah's stuffed bear, plug it into Ethan's old laptop, and beam compressed files through the brief window of cell service the Ridge sometimes grudgingly offered when the clouds thinned. She hadn't trusted just one lifeline. She'd thrown them all. The mountain seemed to pause, listening. Then Mercer broke. "Scatter!" he roared to his men. "Ditch the uniforms! Get to ground! Everyone for himself!" He bolted toward the tree line, abandoning his truck, his deputies, everything. Ethan moved to intercept without thinking, muscles and instincts overriding the sane voice in his head that suggested maybe letting the helicopter and half the state handle this would be smarter. They met at the edge of the slope, where the hill fell away steeply toward the frozen river far below. Mercer's eyes were wild, the polished politician mask gone, leaving something leaner and uglier. He raised his rifle. Ethan raised his. They fired at the same time. Mercer's bullet grazed Ethan's shoulder, hot pain screaming down his arm. Ethan's shot hit Mercer's thigh, staggering him. The sheriff lurched, slipped on the icy crust, arms pinwheeling. For a heartbeat, he balanced on the lip of the drop. Then the snow gave way. He slid, scrabbling, fingers clawing at the icy ground. In a desperate lunge, he grabbed Ethan's injured arm, dragging him forward. They both went down, sliding toward the edge. The world narrowed to white blur, roaring wind, and the distant thunder of rotors. Then something hit Mercer from the side, a solid, snarling weight. Rex. The dog had burst from the trees like a missile, teeth sinking into Mercer's parka, jerking him away from Ethan. The sheriff's fingers tore free of Ethan's sleeve as Rex wrenched his weight sideways. Mercer slid over the edge alone. The drop wasn't sheer, more a series of steep, jagged ledges. He tumbled, hit a shelf, rolled, and finally came to rest in a broken heap against a boulder, 20 feet down. His leg lay at an unnatural angle. His chest rose and fell shallowly. Alive, for now. Rex braced himself at the edge, barking furiously down at the fallen man, his breath steaming. Ethan lay on his back in the snow, gulping freezing air, his shoulder on fire, the taste of metal in his mouth. Above him, the helicopter finally broke through the low clouds, spotlight slicing through the storm, washing over the burning cabin, the scattered deputies, the wrecked trucks. It passed over him, then doubled back, the beam settling on the slope where Mercer lay pinned. "Visual on suspect," a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Do not move. Assistance en route." Ethan laughed once, the sound halfway to a sob. The war wasn't over. Not really. There would be statements to give, investigations to endure, old wounds reopened by bureaucrats with clipboards and flags folded in slow-motion replays. But up here, on this mountain, in this storm, one battle had ended. Rex nudged his hand, whining softly. Ethan scratched behind his ears with his good arm. "Good boy," he whispered. "Hell of a tackle." Days blurred into each other after that. State agents swarmed the town, polite and implacable, peeling back years of silence. Deputies who'd looked the other way suddenly remembered details when confronted with recordings. Families came forward with stories about loved ones who had just disappeared. The old mine got a search warrant and floodlights. They found things in the dark no one wanted to talk about on the evening news. Lena spent a week in the small regional hospital, stubbornly healing. Noah slept curled up against Rex's side in the waiting room until a nurse took pity and found them a spare cot. They tried to call Ethan a hero. He shrugged that off like snow from his shoulders. He'd done what men like him were trained to do: identify the threat, protect the innocent, hold the line. What he wasn't prepared for was what came after. One evening, when the swirl of investigators and reporters had finally ebbed, Ethan stood outside the hospital, watching the sun bleed out behind the ridgeline. The air tasted cleaner, colder. He still wasn't used to feeling his lungs fill without the tight band of old anxiety cinched around them. The door squeaked behind him. "Figured I'd find you brooding out here," Lena said. He turned. She was pale, still moving carefully, but upright. There were new lines around her eyes, but also something he'd never seen before, an ease in her shoulders, as if a weight she'd stopped noticing years ago had finally been lifted. "You're supposed to be resting," he said. "I've been resting for months," she countered, "locked in a hole in the ground, praying my kid wouldn't hear me die. I'm done resting." She walked to the railing beside him, leaning on it with both hands, watching the lights flicker on in Silver Ridge below. For a moment, they just stood there, the quiet comfortable. Noah came out a minute later, Rex at his heels. The boy's cheeks were fuller already. His eyes still held shadows, but there was something else behind them now too. Light. "How long do we have to stay here?" he asked, coming to stand between them. "Doctors say your mom's got another week before she's cleared for serious hiking," Ethan said. "As for after that," he trailed off, because he honestly didn't know. Witness protection, new names, new town, some anonymous suburb where the biggest threat was a nosy neighbor. He could walk away. He'd done it before. Lena looked up at him, reading the unfinished thoughts. "They offered to move us," she said quietly. "New identities, somewhere flat and crowded, where no one knows what mountains smell like, somewhere safer." Noah wrinkled his nose like someone had suggested he live in a mall food court forever. "And?" Ethan asked. Lena's gaze held his. "And Noah asked where you and Rex would be," she said. "When I told him you'd probably stay up here, he said it didn't sound very safe at all, leaving you unsupervised." Noah's ears turned red, but he didn't deny it. Ethan felt something in his chest tilt, slow and seismic. "What are you saying?" he asked quietly. Lena took a breath. "I'm saying," she began, choosing each word like it mattered, which it did, "that I'm tired of running and hiding and waiting for someone else to fix things. The people in this town need someone who isn't afraid to look under rocks. And Noah needs a place that feels like home, not just another safe house with different wallpaper." She met his eyes fully. No flinch, no desperate plea. "I can't promise I won't wake up screaming sometimes," she said. "You've heard it. I can't promise I won't have bad days when the bunker walls close in again. But I can promise I won't disappear on you without a word. If you'd rather go back to being a ghost up there, say so now. I'll respect it." Rex nudged Ethan from the other side, as if casting his vote. Noah looked up at him, trying hard to seem casual and failing. "Rex already likes us," he said. "You kinda have to too. It's a package deal." Ethan looked at the boy, at Lena, at the mountains that had once felt like a fortress, and now, suddenly, looked more like a horizon. He thought of the bunker, of the empty cabin he had lived in before, of the flag in his footlocker, and the faces he carried with him. He realized something that should have been obvious. Survival wasn't the same as living. "Ridge Rescue Volunteer Team has been bugging me for months," he said slowly. "Wanted someone to train their dogs, teach them how to move in bad weather. I kept saying I wasn't interested. Noah's eyes lit. You mean, Rex and I could go find lost people instead of just hiding from bad ones? Lena smiled, soft and fierce. We could make sure nobody else ends up in a hole on this mountain, she said. Not on our watch. The idea settled into Ethan's bones like warmth. A new mission. Not built on secrets and lies and black ops, but on something stubbornly simple. Keep people from dying in the dark. He reached down and scratched Rex's neck. The dog leaned into his hand, eyes half-lidded, utterly content. Guess I can't argue with my commanding officer, Ethan said, nodding at Rex. Looks like he's already decided. Noah grinned. Lena exhaled, a shaky little laugh escaping. The wind off the ridge was still cold. The scars on Ethan's body and mind didn't vanish. The nightmares would probably linger, softer around the edges, but still there. But standing there, with a boy pressed against his side, a woman who refused to break, and a dog who had dragged him, snarling and stubborn, back into the world, Ethan realized something he hadn't dared admit in years. He wasn't alone anymore. The war he'd been fighting inside himself was far from over. But for the first time, he wasn't fighting it just for the sake of surviving another day. He was fighting it for a reason. For them, for the lost hikers they'd haul out of snowstorms, for the runaway kid who picked the wrong road, for the town that had been too scared to look at what was rotting beneath its surface, and for the soldier who had once believed his only value was in what he could destroy. Now, with Rex at his heel and Lena and Noah at his side, Ethan Cole was finally learning how to build something instead. Not a bunker, not a barricade, a life. And it started simply with 3 words he hadn't said and meant in a long, long time. Let's go home.